Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to my Back Porch Rocking Chair. As I sit here looking across Betts Creek, watching the American flag as it gently waves in the breeze. You know, it's hard to believe our nation is preparing to celebrate 250 years of freedom. 250 years. Now think about that. Generations have come, generations have gone. Some built, some defended, some sacrificed everything so that today you and I can enjoy another peaceful summer evening. But today, I don't really want to talk just about fireworks and parties. I don't even want to talk about history books. I want to talk about freedom. Because freedom has a story. Freedom has a price. And freedom has a giver. And whether you're listening from your porch, your car, your living room, or maybe somewhere else kind of far away, just think about it. Right now, right here, you can pull up another rocking chair, get a glass of cold sweet tea, because there's always room for one more. Now let's sit back. Don't want to get too relaxed, but let's take a look back to where freedom really began. When we begin to celebrate the 4th of July, we're really celebrating something much bigger than fireworks. We're celebrating the courage of ordinary people who believed that freedom was worth fighting for. 250 years ago. As you rock back and forth, think about it. Think about it. America wasn't a mighty nation. In fact, it was just simply 13 little colonies. Can you imagine that? 13 little colonies stretched out along the Atlantic coast. Most people were farmers, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, but even some were preachers, and there were teachers, and there were fishermen. Hard-working families trying to build a life. In fact, did you know that there were only about 2.5 million people living in the 13 colonies way back in 1776? Now you compare that to today. Today there are over 340 million Americans. You might say, can you imagine? Only about 2.5 million people lived here then? Today, one of our larger cities has more people than several colonies had combined. And if you can imagine, the colonies had no standing army capable of defending the world's greatest military power. Great Britain possessed the strongest army, the most powerful navy, had enormous wealth, and let's face it, worldwide, as it was then, worldwide influence. While the colonists were facing what looked like an impossible task. And what it might have been like if they had the internet back then. Can you imagine all the social media and the talk about some hair-raising social and political bombshells? Well, they didn't. They depended on word of mouth. They thought getting together and having a town hall meeting was important. Secret conversations. But I guarantee you, in those 13 colonies back in 1776, there was a whole lot of prayer. You know, sometimes the biggest victories begin when ordinary people just trust God and refuse to give up. Many of the soldiers who fought for our independence, they weren't professional soldiers. Again, they were farmers. They were merchants. As we mentioned, school teachers, craftsmen, and yes, even the ministers, along with teenagers, fathers, mothers, and so many others, united in the belief that freedom, true freedom, was worth the price. And because of that, many left their families and farms behind. Many would die or be wounded. But the price they paid was, well, it was more than worth the death, the misery, the tears, the fear, the doubts and anger. Why? Because it meant a better life was ahead for their future generations, thinking more of their future families than the ones they lived with through the wars and the tough times. All because they believed that God was with them, and being free was so much more important than living under an army that many times demanded more than they had to give. Now, in fact, let's now consider the Declaration of Independence. It was approved on July the 4th, 1776, in Independence Hall. It wasn't simply a declaration. Think about that now. It was essentially a public announcement to the King of England. Who in the world would say anything or get word back to the King of England? But they did. And this Declaration of Independence was saying, hey, King, we will govern ourselves. And everyone signing it understood they could be arrested, or they could even be executed for treason if the revolution failed. And this was not an easy task, especially since they had to totally depend on their families, their neighbors, and even strangers from other areas of the colonies that had most people had never visited or had much contact with. But united as colonies, they believed together they could stand for liberty. They could stand for moral justice. And most of all, they could stand for personal freedom. So with the burning desire to become united, there were 56 men who signed the Declaration. Yes, some were wealthy, but willing to lose it all. Yeah, there were some lawyers, there were some doctors, there were some farmers, and as we have the ability now to look back at those early independent Americans, guess what? Many of them lost their fortunes during the war. They lost homes. Some lost family members. They weren't signing a ceremonial document. When they signed that Declaration of Independence, they were risking it all. Everything. Now, I love this quotation from Benjamin Franklin. It kind of fits perfectly into the podcast. It says this: "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." Now, you might smile and say Benjamin Franklin wasn't trying to be funny. He was simply trying to tell the truth. And think about George Washington. Now, one of my favorite facts, President George Washington, the first commander-in-chief, he wasn't even paid for serving as president or commander-in-chief. He asked only to have his legitimate expenses reimbursed. He could have made himself king after the war. Instead, he stepped down. That act amazed much of the world. In fact, King George III reportedly said that if Washington voluntarily gave up power, he would be the greatest man in the world. That single decision helped establish the tradition of civilian leadership that has shaped the United States ever since. During the harsh winter at Valley Forge back in 1777 to 78, around 12,000 soldiers camped there. Many of them had no shoes and had wrapped rags around their feet. Food was scarce. Disease was widespread. And thousands died during the winter. But yet through it all, the army endured. When spring came, they emerged trained, more disciplined, and ready to continue the fight for freedom. Now you can beautifully connect that to life. Sometimes our Valley Forge seasons prepare us for the victories that God has for us ahead. And we have to go through those times to be prepared, to sacrifice, to be ready, and to move forward. Another powerful fact, the Liberty Bell. Did you know that it did not ring on July the 4th? Most historians believe it was rung several days later, actually on July the 8th, when the Declaration of Independence was publicly read to the people in Philadelphia. Many people are surprised by that. But you see, they waited so more could hear together in Philadelphia. And once they were there, they were able to hear and to celebrate the news. We are free, free at last. The freedom our founding fathers fought for gave us the right to worship. He gave us the right to speak, the right to gather, and the right to dream. But there is another freedom, one that no government can give and no government can take away. That's the freedom that comes when Jesus Christ changes a heart. That's why this year at the Lighthouse, our theme has been, let Jesus in, let freedom begin. Because political freedom may change a nation, but listen closely. Spiritual freedom changes a person. In fact, in John 8:36, you've heard me say it before. You'll hear me say it many times over and over. John 8:36. If the Son therefore shall make you free, guess what? Ye shall be free indeed. Since this is the 250th anniversary, I'd like to remind our listeners that this isn't just another Independence Day. Think about it. Only a handful of generations have had the privilege of celebrating America's 250th birthday. Years from now, your grandchildren or great-grandchildren may ask, wow, what was it like when America turned 250? We're living through a milestone that will be remembered long after the fireworks have faded. So for now, let's move forward through the years of all those 250 years of being able to celebrate this great nation's birth. Together, all the states, all the nationalities, and all the various faiths into one nation, coming together to celebrate this remarkable feat from a few small colonies to absolutely the greatest nation in the entire world. You know, when I think about America, stretch out. Need some more tea? When I think about America, I don't first think about Washington, D.C. When I think about America, I look out the window. I walk out on the back porch. I think about my hometown of Savannah, Georgia. I think about neighbors. I think about churches. And I think about porches, front and back. I think a little of Little League Baseball and now soccer. I think about hearing church bells on Sunday morning. And I think about families gathered around the supper table. Because you see, that's the America I remember. America has never been perfect. No nation has ever been perfect. Gosh. But from the very beginning, this country has been filled with people who believe in something bigger than themselves. One of the things that made early America unique was how naturally faith was a part of everyday life. Many communities began important meetings with prayer. Churches often served as gathering places, schools, and centers for helping neighbors. Families commonly read the Bible together in those early days. Faith wasn't something people just checked in on once a week. For many families, it was simply part of everyday living. When George Washington became the nation's first president in 1789, one of his first public acts after taking the oath of office was to attend a worship service and publicly acknowledge God's guidance for the new nation. In his first inaugural address, he spoke of the invisible hand guiding the affairs of humanity and expressed gratitude for divine providence. Whether you call it God's hand or God's providence, our first president believed this nation needed his guidance. And throughout the Revolutionary War, General Washington often encouraged days of prayer and days of thanksgiving. One famous tradition tells of him praying alone in the snow at Valley Forge. While historians debate some details of that account, there's no question that Washington frequently wrote about relying on God's providence and encouraged prayer throughout the struggle. Whatever detail of those stories may be, one thing is certain. Washington believed the new nation depended on God's help. Even in my lifetime, I can remember back as a child here in Georgia, stores closed on Sundays. Families, listen to this now, families actually ate together. As kids, we played outside until dark. And if your bicycle broke down, some neighbor would come and help fix it. If someone got sick, the church showed up. If somebody lost their job, folks would quietly carry groceries to their front door, knock, and just say, "God bless you," and leave. That wasn't because government told people to do that. They did it because they cared. For you see, with freedom comes responsibility. Freedom isn't just the right to do whatever we want. Freedom is also the opportunity to do what's right. Freedom to worship. Freedom to serve. Freedom to volunteer. and so important. Freedom to vote. And yes, we do have freedom to help neighbors, freedom to raise our families, and we have the freedom to share or not share our faith. But from the Bible and the book of Psalm, it tells us in Psalm 33:12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Now notice, it doesn't say perfect is the nation. It says blessed is the nation. For you see, every nation throughout the world, wherever it may be, every nation has challenges. Every generation has struggles. But we can still pray that God will bless America as we seek Him. And folks, I've lived long enough to watch America change in many ways. And some of those changes have been absolutely wonderful. Some of the changes have been very difficult. But one thing hasn't changed. People still need hope. Families still need love. Children still need guidance. And churches need open doors. And through it all, people still need Jesus. I suppose that's why the 4th of July has always meant more to me than just fireworks. It meant family. It meant memories. It meant being together. And when I think back to those celebrations as a little boy, I can't help but smile. I truly have many, many stories to tell of crazy but wonderful events that I have experienced along my life's journey celebrating the freedom of this great country. And most people know how I love the American flag. Well, in closing out for this week's special 4th of July episode, I want to share a very personal story. A story I have not told anyone before, including my wife. It has remained in my heart through all these years. But I feel for this special 250th 4th of July celebration, I need to share it. I will not go into all of the details, for many of you know the circumstances. But as a child, I had polio and was paralyzed from my neck down, and not given much of a chance to survive. And during those times, my mother and father spent many, many hours by my bedside, giving me hope and telling me stories, always trying to cheer me up. And my mom would come to the hospital after she got off from work at Lockheed Aircraft Company, and she would stay as long as possible before going home to get a little sleep, then getting up, going back to work the next morning. Now, my dad, he would come. He worked at Lockheed as well, but he would take care of my brother Buddy and my sister Yvonne, and he would do all the things needed around the house while Mom stayed with me. And you have to understand, my dad was a very quiet person, and like all men back then, and still most of them today, he never wanted to cry a tear in front of other people. And I went most of my life without ever seeing him cry, except when my sister was killed in an automobile accident or when my mom was sick. But there was one very private time that I did see my dad cry. And that was one evening when Mom was sick and could not be with me at the hospital. So Dad was there, fidgeting, looking side to side, sitting by my side, talking to me, trying to make me feel better. And he stayed away from anything to do with my polio. And there was a time when he just didn't have anything else to say. We would be in that hospital room. The door to the room was closed, and it was pretty quiet except for those awful sounds from the various hospital machines that I was hooked up to. And on this occasion, the sun was going down, and the evening light was coming through the windows. And the only visible thing out the window from where I was lying on the bed, dead looking out the window, was a flagpole, and upon that flagpole was the American flag. It was blowing gently in the wind, and as I mentioned, with the sunlight flickering as it waved. It was then when my dad, he turned my little head toward the window, with tears coming down his face, with just me and him in the room. He looked at me and he said, "Son, what do you see?" And I said, "The flag, Daddy. I can see it blowing in the wind. You know, I get to see it a lot because there's nothing else out there for me to see except an airplane every now and then." And that is when he told me, "Bobby, son, look at it again. It's more than a flag. It's freedom. It tells everyone that sees it, you are free, and our God protects us so we can remain free. You see, son, I fought in the war to keep that flag flying. I had some of my best friends killed just inches from me. Back then, I was a machinist mate, and I worked in the ship's engine room. But when we got close to shore and the Marines were landing, my job was to be part of the landing boat crew responsible for lowering and raising the landing boat's forward ramp, so that when they sounded general alarm, I had to put on my battle gear and go climb up the ladder to the landing boat deck and get things ready for the Marines to board. And then we lowered down and started toward the landing zones. Bobby, son, there was bullets whizzing all around. We were just kids, one day playing baseball and making plans for our futures. And then the war came. Pearl Harbor was attacked. I had friends that had already enlisted and were stationed at Pearl Harbor. And words came of several of them being wounded or killed in the attack. All of us boys were angry. We were so mad. And we wanted to go and protect our country. But we really did not understand the horror and the fear of what war was all about. My dad had never talked about the war. To him, it was very, very private, and the memories hurt him deeply. But here I was on a hospital bed, unable to move anything but my head from side to side, and my dad sitting there with tears flowing down his face, talking to me like I was a man, not a kid, not sick, but an American kid living in a free country, a country that could have lost its freedom unless the people were willing to give up the easy life, the fun life, the life of dreams and opportunities, and to go fight for the right to stay free in some foreign country and be sure all their dreams could come true. As Dad continued looking at the flag blowing gently in the wind outside my hospital window, he continued with his story. Son, I can't tell you how scared I was, how I wanted to be back home. It was cold and windy and like a crazy nightmare all rolled into one. I heard screaming. Some of the screams were orders to the Marines to be ready to roll. Other screams were those of men being shot right there in the boat. Some screams was that of bullets and mortars flying by trying to find targets. Son, this was war. And our boat commander, he was standing in the back watching through his binoculars, ready to give the order to drop the landing ramp. And then he shouted, you know, there's no single universal recorded quote from a landing commander when it was time to drop the ramps for the Marines. In reality, under heavy enemy fire, the orders were strictly functional, with the coxswains shouting short, urgent commands like, drop the ramp, or let them go, to deploy the troops. Because combat conditions were so chaotic, boat commanders frequently had to repeat the command and repeat the command. This was because the roar of the boat's dual diesel engines drowned out the first attempt. And as it's recorded in other intense landings, the Marines or soldiers, realizing the danger of the incoming fire, sometimes had to aggressively urge the coxswains to lower the ramps so they could exit the landing boats. Dad said he can remember the command. Sailor, lower the ramp, lower the ramp. And Dad was on one side and his best friend was on the other. They looked at each other and got eye contact, and they shook their heads and they hit the release, and the ramp dropped, and the Marines hollered as they went rushing off the boat, right into the enemy's machine gun fire, with many being shot as they entered the water. Can you imagine? Dad paused. His lips were trembling. I was laying on the bed, and the tears dropped from his cheeks onto my face. And with tears flowing and in a silent whispered breath, he said, I looked over at Michael for the signal to raise the ramp back up so we could back up and head back to the ship. Our eyes locked onto each other, and that is when that is when Michael got hit in the head with a bullet and slumped down into the bottom of the boat. The ramp was still down. Water was rushing in and out. The water was colored in blood. And it was then that my dad saw the Marine that was carrying the standard, the American flag, had also been shot. And the flag was floating on the ramp, soaked in the blood of those that had just moments before went running to represent that flag and protect that flag. And they were protecting that flag that the people back home would have freedom because of what that flag represented. Dad broke down. He'd never talked to me like this. And he looked into my face. And he said, another sailor ran down the ramp, grabbed the bloody flag, raised it back toward the sky and shouted, God bless America and the freedom this flag stands for. And the ramp closed, and the sailor was left in the water holding that flag. As the boat backed away and headed to the safety of the ship, my dad said to me as he rubbed my hair as he stood up, he turned toward the window and he let go of my hand and he gave a salute to the flag outside the window. And he turned back to me and said, Bobby, promise me you will always honor the flag. Son, keep the flag flying, giving hope. And remember the Americans that gave their very lives that we might remain as a free country forever and ever. And tell everyone, everywhere that you go in your life, because I believe God will give you a good life, that you are proud to be an American. Will you promise me that, my son? He sat back down, he rubbed my hair again, and he said, this story is for me and you, and should remain within us as a bond and a reminder that life is precious, but freedom makes it worth living. And the flag is our promise to each other, son, to keep it flying, that it may remain strong. My dad never mentioned that again. And it was a secret, a moment in time between father and son, between us. I'm not able to recall the actual dates or ships or all of the other events. I was just a child on a sick bed, watching a dad that had never cried a tear talk to me as if I was a man. And only those things that stayed within me through those years, and some of the facts have faded. But this was the way my dad's story of a life-changing event between father and son, private and sacred, and not shared again until this week, because I think it is time. Many years later, I was fortunate to be on a trip with my mom and dad to Hawaii, and we went to the Pearl Harbor National Memorial. Its centerpiece is the USS Arizona Memorial, which spans the sunken battleship where 1,177 crew members died during the December the 7th, 1941 attack. Its centerpiece is that USS Arizona. My dad and I saluted the flag at the memorial. And it was then that both of us, standing there together, saluting that flag, could look at each other, and as tears flowed down our faces, we knew about the memory of what had happened there. But for me, it was also when I remembered the story my dad told his little boy about how precious it is to see that flag still raised to the top and blowing in the wind, saying, "Freedom, freedom." Always remember your freedom. One final golden nugget for this week's special edition. Did you know that the song "God Bless America" wasn't written during the Revolutionary War? It actually was written by Irving Berlin in 1918 while he was serving in the Army, then revised and introduced to the nation in 1938 by Kate Smith. And over the years, it has become one of America's most beloved patriotic songs. Not an official national anthem, but as a heartfelt prayer asking God to continue His blessing on our country. And hopefully, during this 250th anniversary celebration, we will remember, through it all, God bless America again. As I sit here in this old rocking chair, I've lived long enough to know that freedom is never something to be taken for granted. It was purchased by ordinary people, many of whom never came home. It has been preserved by generations of brave men and women wearing the uniform of our nation. And every time I see Old Glory dancing in the breeze, I still think about a little hospital room, my daddy's tears, and a promise I made to him. I promised him I would always honor that flag. But even more than that, I would honor the people who sacrificed to keep it flying. And today, as America celebrates 250 years, what an incredible milestone. May we never forget where our freedom came from. May we never stop thanking those who defended them. May we never lose the values that made this nation strong. And above all, may we never forget that the greatest freedom any of us will ever know doesn't come from Washington, D.C. It comes from Calvary. Our theme this year at the Lighthouse has simply been, let Jesus in, let freedom begin. Because political freedom can change a nation. But folks, Jesus Christ can change a heart. As we celebrate Independence Day, hug your family, thank a veteran, pray for America, fly your flag proudly, and thank God for His amazing grace. So for now, from my back porch rocking chair, I'm Bobby Autry, wishing you and your family a safe, joyful, and an awesomely blessed 4th of July. For truly, God bless America, and may God richly bless you. Until next time, always remember, right here on this back porch, overlooking Betts Creek, there's always room for one more.